European leaders will join Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy in talks with U.S. President Donald Trump in Washington today. The aim is to seek an end to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The meeting comes as Trump met Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday, but the talks failed to yield any breakthrough on a ceasefire. For more on this, we're now joined by our U.S. correspondent in Washington, Simon Marks. A very good afternoon to you, Simon. South African time. That is big day at the White House, Donald Trump wrote yesterday.
Yeah, it's an absolutely huge day at the White House that Donald Trump was sort of celebrating in that posting on social media a little bit earlier. But it's not necessarily going to be a hugely positive day for him. I mean, European leaders have flown here. They've raced here, essentially, in a bid to do two things. One is to protect President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who will be returning to the Oval Office at around 7 o'clock tonight, South Africa time, for the first time since he was on the receiving end of that made-for-TV drubbing by President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance back in February. So the Europeans are very keen to make sure that there is no repeat of that. But the reason why so many Europeans have travelled here, and they include British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, the Finnish President Alexander Stubb, the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, the head of NATO Mark Rutte, and also Ursula von der Leyen, the European Union Commission chief. Why are they all here? Because they became very concerned over the weekend that after Friday's failed summit meeting with Vladimir Putin in Alaska, Donald Trump shifted his position and started embracing many of the positions that were articulated during that summit meeting with Vladimir Putin, including the fact that he's no longer interested in trying to seek a short-term truce or ceasefire in Ukraine. He wants to go hell for leather to full-scale peace negotiations, something the Europeans and the Ukrainians say can't happen for as long as Ukraine is on the receiving end of incoming fire from Russia. But also it became evident that he wants Ukraine to make deep territorial sacrifices to the Russians, exactly as Vladimir Putin has demanded. And the Europeans came to the conclusion over the weekend that President Trump simply can't be trusted to lead this process on his own. And that's why they've come here. They've come here basically to hold him to account and try and pull him out of Vladimir Putin's orbit.
Is there consensus in Washington as to what could make or break these talks?
Well, there are key issues that have to be discussed today, including that core issue of trust. And it's very interesting to see within the last couple of hours, President Ramaphosa disclosing that he had a conversation with President Putin earlier today. President Putin, according to the South African presidency, expressed satisfaction with the manner in which his talks with President Trump proceeded back in Alaska on Friday, and the emerging alignment of the peace process. Now, European leaders are going to look at that and say, Vladimir Putin thinks the emerging alignment on the peace process is not an alignment between Russia and Ukraine, it's an alignment between Russia and the United States. And that is going to underscore the determination of Europeans to try and hold Donald Trump to account for reneging on an agreement that they say he struck with them only last Wednesday to prioritize Ukraine's concerns during his conversations with President Putin. But they also want to understand what kind of security guarantees the Russians appear to have agreed to in their talks with Donald Trump on Friday. Steve Witkoff, the US Special Envoy, described them over the weekend as effectively an offer of Article 5-like language to provide security guarantees. The Europeans have absolutely no idea what that means because Article 5 language is all about NATO and its mutual defence covenants, and there's no suggestion that security guarantees are going to be provided under the terms of the NATO Charter. So they want to understand what they view as Steve Witkoff's gobbledygook on television on Sunday really means in detailed terms for guaranteeing Ukraine's peace in the event, Ukraine's security in the event that a peace agreement is achieved.
According to President Ramaphosa, President Putin underscored the need for more compromise on key issues. What would be your understanding of that?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course he did. I mean, President Putin wants the basic surrender by Ukraine of the Crimean Peninsula, which, of course, Russian forces annexed back in 2014. They want the surrender of the entire Donbass region, much of which they do not control and are still fighting to conquer. And under those circumstances, they say they'll consider freezing the conflict in place. Well, Volodymyr Zelenskyy is ruling all of that out. He, by the way, is constitutionally prevented from ceding territory to the Russians or anyone. He can't simply sign documents that say, I'm signing territory away. And it is President Trump's embrace of those positions that really worries the Europeans. They noted President Trump's message on social media last night saying that it's up to President Zelenskyy now. He can end the war if he wants, or he can carry on fighting. He appeared to infer on social media last night what he's falsely claimed before, that Ukraine started the war, not Russia. And he said there are no circumstances under which Ukraine will ever get Crimea back, nor will it be granted membership of NATO. Well, those are all Vladimir Putin's positions being parroted on social media by Donald Trump on the eve of these all-important meetings at the White House. I do not think, Vuyo, it is overstating it to say that the future of the 80-year transatlantic alliance between the United States and its European allies that has guaranteed the peace in Europe for 8 decades is on the line today. I mean, European leaders want to see evidence from Donald Trump that he's not simply adhering himself with superglue to Vladimir Putin. And then they're going to have to ask themselves, how can they trust him? Because the growing concern in Europe is that the American president is constantly influenced by the last voice in his ear. And in this particular case, the last voice in his ear was Vladimir Putin's on Friday.
Simon Marks, thank you very much for your time ahead of that meeting between Presidents Trump, Zelenskyy, and, of course, European leaders.